All right. Let's try Josh in Tennessee. Are you there, Josh?
Yes. Hi, this is Josh.
Hey, you're on with Scott and Matt. How are you?
Hey, Josh.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted my wife wanted me to call in. She's an atheist. I'm a Christian, and so it's so she's really on top of her Bible knowledge, and so we're always kind of, she's trying to disprove God, and I'm trying to prove that it's the truth. So,
Sure.
yeah, I kind of feel like there's so many different personal experiences with God that kind of, to me, that kind of proves that he does exist. And even though we can't see him, but we can certainly feel that he's around, in my opinion.
How would your wife respond to that?
She basically just says that you got to prove it. And
well, you mentioned personal experiences. You mentioned personal experiences with God. I'm wondering if you could give an example of a personal experience with God and how you know that it's a personal experience with God, because there are people who claim personal experiences with all kinds of gods and with alien abductions and others. How do we know that because you've experienced something that you think is an experience with God, that you're right?
I just through prayer and just going through the motions. Basically, it's when obviously everyone has their hard times and everyone has good times, and when we fall on hard times, it's just, to my personal experience, there's just, God has always proven himself to help me in the end. So any struggle that I've had didn't really shut me down completely, but I've always came out better on the other side.
Yeah, so I understand that's what you believe happened. What I was asking is, how can we know that's what happened? Like, you think that God has helped you and God's spoken to you and you've had some sort of experience and God's helped you in trying times. How do we show that that's true and not just you think that God has helped you in those trying times?
Well, I guess it's just, you get that feeling. I don't know if you've ever heard of God bumps, like kind of like you get those goosebumps kind of, you just get that overwhelming feeling that he's there. And
yes. So for the record, I'm a former Southern Baptist who was going to be a preacher and who has stood in church. And while praising and singing, I've had God bumps, goosebumps, euphoria, been ecstatic, convinced that I was in the presence of the Holy Spirit. But that's what I was convinced of at the time. And when investigating it, it turns out that I can't demonstrate that that was true, and there's no good reason to think it was true. So on a couple of occasions here, I've asked you, how would you know that this is true? And you just keep coming back with that you're convinced. I mean, how could, and I'll let Scott jump in here because he may have a different take on this, but how can Scott and I know that when you experience God, you're actually experiencing God and not just saying you're experiencing God?
I guess that's based on faith, then. That'd be, it's a faith-based, it's obviously we believe in the Bible, and I consider the Bible a history book. It's, all the way from the Old Testament to the New Testament. So it's basically a history book, and a lot of the things that happen in the Bible, we can some of them we can use in our personal experiences, and I do know that my wife obviously pointed out the scriptures that are that are bad and stuff like that. And I get all that,
What about the ones that aren't true? Like when you go to Genesis and the order of events in creation don't match up with what science says the order of events would be. Doesn't that kind of show that that's not accurate?
I get what you're saying as far as, but we really don't know what really happened in the beginning. So, I mean,
okay, but we know there was never a time where there was one man and one woman whose names we knew, who were the originators and progenitors of the entire human species. We know that's not true.
Well, we don't.
Okay,
Hey,
well, I do. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, sure. So, hey, Josh, a couple of things stood out in what you said. One was that, based on your experiences, whenever you've had a hard time, it was God that lifted you up again. Are you familiar with confirmation bias? This bias that we all do, where we kind of count the hits and ignore the misses when it comes to interpreting data in light of like what we already believe. Like if you're driving on the road and you have this belief that Asians are bad drivers, right? Anytime somebody cuts you off and they happen to be Asian, you're going to go, see, I told you Asians were bad drivers, but you're ignoring the hundreds of times somebody cuts you off and they're not Asian, or the hundreds of times somebody doesn't cut you off and they are Asian. Do you know that concept where we kind of pick out what fits with our previously existing worldview and we ignore the rest?
I do, yeah. I mean, I see what you're saying in a sense that,
Yeah.
obviously.
So do you think is it possible
right,
that you're doing that? I mean, when you say that every time you've had a hard time in life, God lifted you up again, is it possible that you're remembering all the times that maybe you prayed and you felt like that prayer was answered, but you're forgetting the hundreds more times when you're having a hard time and God didn't answer you? And maybe, you explain that away by saying God works in mysterious ways, or God has a lot of people to take care of, or God wanted me to learn a lesson from this. But doesn't it seem like we live in a world that's indistinguishable from God not existing at all? I mean, would you be saying the same thing if you were a refugee family in Saudi Arabia? Or do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories of people people coming here that had nothing and just worked hard and maybe they were Christians and maybe they prayed and they'd be, they got really good careers and became very successful, and they could.
Do you think there are people who are Christians who prayed who are homeless and never had a good career?
It's possible. I mean, I can't speak for their path.
Okay.
Or what.
Of all the homeless people in the United States, do you think none of them are sincere, committed Christians? Do you think that's even likely?
I would think that some homeless are Christians, I would think.
So we actually have data on this, and most people who are not doing well in life tend to be more religious, and that makes sense, right? Except it falsifies the idea that believing in God or praying to a God guarantees any kind of prosperity, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, I guess every walk in life is different. And
well, do you think the people who are like poor and broke and homeless are just bad Christians? Like they didn't follow God, so God didn't reward them, and they're just getting what they deserve?
No, of course not.
Okay, I don't either. And I'm glad you said that. That was honestly not a trap. That was actually me asking, because I think you're better than what some of your beliefs would belie. And the reason here is that you called in. We're trying to talk about, is there a good reason to believe there's a God? And when we ask you, what we get is, oh, well, it's just something you take on faith, or I've just have all these experiences. And when we start asking questions about those experiences and what conclusions one could reasonably address, or how an outsider could know that you're actually having an experience with God, you don't seem to have anything to come back with other than this is just like how you feel about it. And that's fine. It's your life, and you're going to believe whatever you're convinced of. It's just,
sure.
Could you imagine a different person calling in to this show with the exact same justification for their belief in a different God, that instead of the Christian God, maybe the Muslim God, or we'll just go with the God of the Jains or whatever. And they're convinced that they have some sort of interactions with their God, but they can provide no more evidence than you do. And they just say it's something that they take on faith and it's a matter of personal experience. Should we accept their personal experience?
That's a good question. And I mean, from my experience, I'm going to say no, because I believe in the Bible and God and Jesus.
Yeah, but see, that's the problem.
So Josh, that's interesting. So there's two reasons why you wouldn't accept somebody else's personal experience. Now, one would be just because the slot is filled for you, and that's sort of a more, that's kind of circular in terms of the way that you're reasoning there. But another reason could be, but honest, yeah, sure. I mean, it could just be that, I don't accept those other gods or those other reasons for other gods because I believe in this one and that's that. But I wonder if you do recognize that it is possible for people to have experiences that are indeed very profound for them, that feel very real for them, and that you, as an outsider to their faith, does not show that their religion is true. Like, that those kinds of experiences don't prove that the religion that they infer from it is actually true. So isn't it possible that you're making the same mistake, the same kind of inference that they are?
I really don't think so. I mean, I could go on and on. I mean, as far as, what, we have the temple in Jerusalem, and the fact that, there is a lot of things in the Bible that
But do you think a Muslim couldn't go on and on? Do you think a Muslim couldn't make the same argument against Christianity that you're making against Islam now?
I guess that's where, I'm kind of coming out and say this, but I guess that's where kind of Satan comes in, where, the delusion and
right, but they believe in Satan as well, and they believe that you're deluded, right? So how do we tell which one of you is right?
Not only that, but and I don't want to derail this, so I apologize for this, but it comes up every time. Josh, you think there's a Satan who is trying to deceive us, right?
I do think so, yeah.
Okay, I did too. When I was a believer, I thought so too. And here's what fixed that for me. If there is a Satan who's trying to deceive us, is Satan able to do supernatural things? Like, can he manipulate reality in such a way that it plays with our perceptions and makes us think things that aren't accurate? Can he actively deceive in a way because he's more powerful than humans? Can't he do things that humans are just, you can't be immune to it, right?
If we don't have a good walk with Christ, I would say, yeah.
So yes, unless God is actively protecting you, you are absolutely prone to being a victim of Satan's tricks, despite your best intentions, right?
Yeah. To a certain point. Obviously, we know everyone knows right from wrong. And
well, I'm not convinced that everyone knows right from wrong. As a matter of fact, I'm convinced that that's not true. And also, we don't all agree on what's right and wrong. So that's a big issue, which we may be able to dig into. But here's the thing. If there's a God and a devil, and the devil has the ability to manipulate reality in such a way as to confuse me, and the only way that I can be safe from the devil's manipulations is if God decides to protect me, that there's nothing I can do on my own to protect myself, then ultimately, whether or not I'm deceived by the devil is God's responsibility, not mine. And if I'm going to sit here and say, well, I'm definitely not deceived by the devil, and I don't have God, I can't say that. But similarly, no God could rightfully judge me for being deceived if the only protection is his and he refuses it.
Right. Well, too, but at the same time, once you're saved, you're saved. And, in my opinion, it's not hard to be saved by Christ. It's, you know, you
So, okay,
believe
so
in Christ
no,
and
let's stop this. Why doesn't God just save everyone right now?
That's a good question. I don't
It
know.
is.
I don't know.
And until God answers
that.
it, I don't give a crap for apologetics like this. Until somebody, because you can say once saved, always saved. I have pastor friends that think that, who think they're going to see me in heaven because they think I was saved. I have parents who say once saved, always saved, who say that I wasn't actually saved. I was just, deceived. You can make up whatever you want. What we're looking for, what I'm looking for, what Scott's looking for, what everybody's looking, give us evidence, give us a good reason to believe. And if the reasons you give us to believe can be used by other people with other religions to get us to believe the same thing, then they're not good enough. We need something that is specific, that shows evidence for your proposition, that excludes others.
So I didn't make it up. I'm quoting from the Bible. So
I don't give it. Okay, go ahead, Scott.
I can't help but feeling like I'm interacting with a hostage tape or something. Josh, you don't sound like, I mean, you said at first that your wife sort of pressured you to call in, and you don't sound like somebody who's super enthusiastic about having to rationally defend your faith. You actually do sound like somebody who views your religion as a matter of trust, as a matter of faith. You don't sound like somebody who would allege that we can know with any kind of certainty that Christianity is true using evidence.
That's the thing. You're absolutely right. You can't. The evidence to prove that God exists isn't necessarily in the physical. There is some things in the physical, but like Jerusalem and the temple and stuff like that. But it is on a faith-based level, and people need to realize that. And if they don't, they don't. It's everyone's walk is different, and I just. But that's just what I want. That's just what I want.
Where do you stand on? Where do you stand on damnation? I'm just curious. Do you believe? Are you an annihilationist? A universalist? Do you believe that your wife, unless you do something about it, is on her way to hell?
I don't really know the whole formality of who goes to heaven and who goes to hell. Of course, the Bible says that if you don't. The only way to God is through Christ. And if a person just says, forget about Christ, forget about God, I don't need that, and I don't really know what will happen to them. But for me,
do you think that your wife is a good person?
I do, yeah.
So would it be heaven for you to know that your wife is suffering for all eternity? Could you enjoy being in heaven knowing that your wife is being infinitely tormented? I wouldn't. If I converted to Christianity and I genuinely believed that my wife was suffering the entire time that I was in heaven, that wouldn't be heaven for me. In fact, it would be hell. Do you feel that way at all?
Right. I do, and that's why we're always discussing, and she goes to church with me sometimes, and she doesn't believe in hell, but at the same time, as far as what the Bible says on those issues of hell, of heaven and hell, and you can kind of debate it all day long, but I really don't know for sure.
Let me jump in for a second, Josh. Let me jump in for a second here, Josh. So you sound like a nice guy, and you're willing to admit that there's a lot of stuff you just don't know. There was some stuff that you kind of pushed forward, like, once saved, always saved. So you have some doctrine you believe in, but you're not completely sure on the hell thing. I think that if you were married to a Christian woman, I think you'd be a little bit more sure about the hell doctrine thing than you are in your current position. But yes. That's just me going from the trend of what I've seen of other people. The Bible also says, do not be unequally yoked. So, there's issues there. But at the end of the day, here's the only thing I want from you, Josh. Your wife goes to church with you on occasion. Take some time and read let's here go. I will offer to buy you a copy of this and send it to you. If you can talk with the people behind the scenes, and I'll get an email address or whatever else. I'm going to recommend Guy P. Harrison's 50 Reasons People Give for Believing in a God. It's a great starter book that doesn't require you to know everything about epistemology or philosophy or arguments. It's just a real nuts and bolts thing that a friend of mine wrote. He's written several books, but this one, 50 Reasons People Give for Believing in a God, goes through things people claim about why they believe in a God and offers response to them in tiny little essays. It's a great book of short stuff. It is a good introduction. I'd like you to read that with as much of an open mind as you can and realize that the reasons that you give for believing in God are something that somebody else could give for believing in a different God or the same God with different doctrines or any number of things. And that wouldn't it be better to learn the best standards of evidence and to reserve judgment on something about whether or not there's a God until there's actually good evidence for it? Because you wanted to go back to faith several times. And I'm curious, do you think there's any position that I couldn't just accept on faith? Like, could I just be convinced that men are better than women based on faith, or that white people are better than black people just based on faith? Isn't that possible?
No, because that's
no. You don't think you think it's not possible for somebody to be convinced that their race is superior based on evidence, or sorry, based on faith?
I mean, the whole Bible.
So let me ask this, Josh. Now, let me ask this, Josh. So for all those people who think white people are superior to black people, if they're not making that decision based on faith, are you suggesting that they have good evidence to support that position?
No.
So then is it possible that they're just taking it on faith?
I mean, in a way, I guess you could say that in their own way. See,
faith isn't a path to truth. No. Faith is the excuse people give for believing something when they don't have a good reason. Because if somebody asks, why do you believe this, and you have a good reason, you give the good reason. And if you don't have a good reason, you say you just have to take it on faith. So if you'd like a copy of the book, I'm gonna move you back to hold, and I'll let the call screeners get info, find out if you want a copy of the book, and I'll be happy to send it to you myself. But we're gonna move on to other callers because we only got like an hour left in the show. So
thanks, Josh. You're a good sport.
Thanks, Josh.